"She's not qualified for combat jets," the instructor dismissed. But when she rolled up her sleeve, revealing a distinctive scar only elite test pilots carried, everything changed. The Nevada sun blazed mercilessly over Falcon Ridge Air Force Base. Along the flight line, a woman in oil-stained coveralls knelt beside an F-35 Lightning II, her hands steady as she calibrated the aircraft's targeting system. To everyone on base, she was just Alex, another ground crew technician who kept the million-dollar fighters airworthy. She moved through the hangars like smoke, quiet and purposeful. Her name never appeared on flight schedules. The hotshot pilots assumed she was some admin transfer who'd washed out of flight school. They'd crack jokes about her, pretending to understand avionics, and swagger past without a second glance. If they'd looked closer, they might have noticed how her eyes tracked every takeoff and landing. How she could diagnose engine problems by sound alone. How her hands moved across control panels with the muscle memory of someone who'd spent thousands of hours in a cockpit, not just underneath one. Inside the squadron ready room, Alex walked past a cluster of smirking recent graduates from Top Gun and entered the advanced flight simulator bay. Captain Torres, a weathered instructor with 3 combat deployments, was debriefing a successful intercept mission with Lieutenant Mitchell, the squadron's golden boy. "Can I help you?" Torres asked, his tone carrying the dismissive edge reserved for enlisted personnel who'd wandered into officer territory. Requesting simulator time, Alex stated flatly. Torres raised an eyebrow, glancing at his clipboard. "You're not on the schedule. Hell, you're not even listed as qualified personnel." "I can handle it." "That's not what your service record indicates," Torres dismissed with a wave. "You're ground crew. Stay on the ground." Mitchell smirked, his perfectly pressed flight suit pristine compared to Alex's work clothes. "Come on, Captain. Let's see what the wrench-turner's got. Might be good for a laugh." Torres shrugged, amused by the break in routine. He keyed the simulator console, selecting the most challenging scenario in the system. "Fine. You get 3 minutes. High-altitude intercept, 6 enemy fighters, no briefing, no backup. The computer will eat you alive." Alex stepped into the simulator pod without hesitation. Behind the bulletproof glass, Torres shook his head. "She won't even get a radar lock." But the virtual F-35 on the massive display screens came alive with a fluidity that made both men blink hard. Alex's aircraft knifed through the digital sky with tactical precision that took years of combat flying to develop. She used energy management techniques, barrel rolls that bled enemy speed while maintaining her own, that weren't taught in basic flight school. The first missile lock came within 30 seconds. Direct hit. The second enemy fighter tried to go vertical, but Alex anticipated the move, cutting inside his turn radius for an impossible shot. Another kill. The remaining 4 enemies tried to swarm her, but she went cold on the radar, disappearing into electronic noise before emerging behind them like a ghost. In 90 seconds, all 6 hostiles were burning pixels on the screen. The simulation ended with Alex's fuel and ammunition barely touched. The pod door hissed open and Alex stepped out, her expression unchanged, as if she'd just finished checking tire pressure instead of executing maneuvers that defied physics. "Where exactly did you learn to fly like that?" Torres asked, his voice strained and suspicious. "I didn't learn," Alex replied and headed toward the exit. Only then did Mitchell notice something that made his blood run cold. As Alex reached for the door handle, her coverall sleeve rode up, revealing a distinctive surgical scar running along her shoulder, the kind of mark left by emergency ejection seat procedures. But not just any ejection. This scar had the telltale pattern that came from experimental aircraft incidents. "Captain," Mitchell's voice dropped to a whisper. "That's not ground crew." Later that night, Torres made a secure call to a man with stars on his collar and clearance levels that didn't officially exist. The next morning brought chaos to Falcon Ridge. A reconnaissance flight had gone dark over the Pacific, their last transmission a garbled mayday call about engine failure and descending through storm clouds. With only 2 F-35s mission ready and a search window rapidly closing, the base commander was pulling every available pilot from leave. General Harrison burst into Hangar 7 like a hurricane in dress blues. "Which bird is closest to flight status?" he barked at the assembled ground crew. Alex wiped hydraulic fluid from her hands with a red shop rag. "Tail number 77 Alpha is prepped and ready. Just finished the post-maintenance systems check." "I asked about aircraft availability, not your opinion, Airman," Harrison roared, his face flushing. "Just get that bird ready for a real pilot." Alex turned back to the F-35, running her hands along the aircraft's surfaces with an intimacy that went beyond professional maintenance. In the cockpit, she performed the final systems verification herself, her fingers dancing across switches and displays with practiced efficiency. As she leaned forward to check the heads-up display calibration, her sleeve pulled back again, exposing that distinctive shoulder scar. Staff Sergeant Brooks, a logistics coordinator walking past with a clipboard, stopped dead in his tracks. The scar wasn't just from any ejection seat incident. Brooks had been around experimental aircraft programs long enough to recognize the specific pattern left by the Martin Baker Mk-18 seats used only in classified test aircraft. The kind of planes that didn't officially exist. "Ma'am," Brooks said quietly, "where did you get that mark?" Alex's eyes met his for a long moment. She said nothing, but something in her expression made Brooks drop his clipboard and jog toward the command building. Minutes later, Harrison stormed back across the tarmac, his attention fixed on Alex as if seeing her for the first time. He noticed the powered-up aircraft systems, the completed electronic checklist signed with a call sign that made his mouth go dry, Phantom Test 7. "What the hell is this?" Harrison demanded, pointing at the signature on his tablet. "You needed a pilot," Alex said calmly, her hands still working on the pre-flight routine. "The bird's ready to fly." Brooks appeared at Harrison's shoulder, whispering urgently in the general's ear. As the words sank in, Harrison's face went pale. The call sign, Phantom Test 7, was legendary in certain circles, a test pilot who'd pushed experimental aircraft beyond their limits, who'd survived crashes that should have been fatal, who'd disappeared from active duty after a classified incident over the Nevada test range. "Is it true?" Harrison asked, his voice suddenly quiet with something approaching reverence. "You flew with the Aurora program under Colonel Vance?" Alex didn't answer. She didn't need to. The scar told the whole story. Just then, the tower radio crackled to life with an emergency transmission. A training flight had suffered multiple system failures and was attempting an emergency landing with minimal instruments. The pilot was flying blind in deteriorating weather, and no other qualified pilots were immediately available. "Let me take the rescue bird," Alex said, her voice cutting through the static. Harrison hesitated, protocol warring with necessity. "You're not cleared for active flight status." "Neither is that pilot going to be cleared for much of anything if someone doesn't get out there," Alex countered. "I'm the only one here who knows how to fly on instruments alone in zero visibility." The general stared at her for a long beat, seeing past the coveralls and grease stains to something else entirely. Finally, he reached into a nearby locker and pulled out a flight helmet, its surface scarred from years of use. "This was Phantom 7's gear," he said, handing it to her. "Seems fitting it should fly again." As Alex walked toward the F-35, the entire base seemed to hold its breath. Ground crews stopped their work. Pilots emerged from buildings. Even the tower controllers pressed against their windows. She climbed into the cockpit with movements that were purely instinctual, her hands finding controls without looking, her body settling into the ejection seat like coming home after a long exile. The F-35's engine spun up with a sound like controlled thunder, and Alex's voice cut through the radio chatter with an authority that made everyone listening straighten their shoulders. "Falcon Tower, Phantom Test 7 requesting immediate departure for search and rescue operation. Rolling now." The F-35 lifted off Falcon Ridge with the kind of smooth precision that made veteran pilots nod in appreciation. But as Alex's aircraft disappeared into the storm-darkened sky, the base erupted in quiet chaos. In the command center, General Harrison was making encrypted phone calls to Washington. The Aurora program was supposed to be buried deeper than nuclear launch codes, its personnel records sealed behind classifications that didn't have names. Yet here was Phantom Test 7, alive and apparently working as ground crew under an assumed identity. "Sir," Brooks appeared at Harrison's elbow, carrying a thick manila folder marked with security classifications. "I pulled some strings with personnel archives. You're going to want to see this." The file was mostly redacted black bars, but what remained painted a picture that made Harrison's hands shake slightly. Captain Alexandra "Alex" Reynolds, former test pilot for advanced tactical aircraft. Multiple commendations for valor. Survivor of the Aurora incident, classified details restricted to Level 7 clearance and above. She was declared MIA after the Nevada crash, Brooks continued quietly. Officially, Phantom Test 7 died in a training accident. The program was terminated, all records sealed. Then how the hell is she here fixing landing gear? Harrison demanded. That's the thing, sir. According to this, she never officially returned to active duty. Technically, she doesn't exist. Meanwhile, across the base, Lieutenant Mitchell was doing some investigating of his own. The simulator performance had bothered him all night. No ground crew technician could fly like that without years of advanced training. He'd called in favors from friends at other bases, asking about mysterious transfers and pilots who dropped off the radar. The answers he got back made his blood run cold. "You're talking about ghost pilots," his contact at Nellis had whispered over the secure line. Test pilots who pushed experimental aircraft so far beyond normal parameters that they became liabilities. The kind of people who knew too much about things that never officially happened. Mitchell found himself standing outside Hangar 7, staring at the maintenance logs Alex had been filing for months. Her technical notes were impossibly detailed, describing aircraft systems and performance characteristics that weren't available in standard maintenance manuals. She wrote about engine efficiency curves and aerodynamic stress points like someone who'd felt them personally at 40,000 feet. Back in the command center, Harrison's secure phone rang. The voice on the other end carried the authority of the Pentagon's deepest levels. "General, this is Admiral Chen, Office of Special Projects. I understand you've encountered someone claiming to be Phantom Test 7. "Not claiming, Admiral. I've seen the scar pattern, the call sign, the flight characteristics. This is the real deal." A long pause. "That's impossible. Phantom Test 7 died in the Aurora incident 3 years ago. We have wreckage. We held a memorial service." "Then you held a service for someone who's currently flying a rescue mission in an F-35, Harrison replied grimly. "What aren't you telling me about Aurora?" Another pause, longer this time. "General, that information is compartmentalized above your clearance level. What I can tell you is that if Phantom Test 7 is alive, there are people in Washington who are going to want to have a very long conversation with her." Outside, the storm was intensifying. Weather radar showed the rescue zone as a solid wall of red and yellow, the kind of conditions that grounded aircraft and killed pilots who took unnecessary risks. In the tower, controllers tracked Alex's aircraft as it disappeared into the worst of the storm. Her radio transmissions were calm, professional, describing instrument readings and navigation points with the kind of precision that came from flying in conditions where a single mistake meant death. "Falcon Tower, Phantom Test 7. I have radar contact with the distressed aircraft. Beginning intercept approach." The transmission cut through static like a knife, and everyone listening realized they were witnessing something unprecedented. This wasn't just a rescue mission, it was the return of a pilot who'd supposedly died, flying like someone who'd never stopped pushing the boundaries of what was possible. Brooks looked at the classified file in his hands, then at the radar screen showing Alex's aircraft dancing through impossible weather. "Sir," he said quietly to Harrison, "what do we do when ghosts come back to life?" 20 miles out over the Pacific, Alex found the crippled training aircraft through a combination of radar tracking and pure instinct. The F-16 was barely maintaining altitude, its pilot fighting controls that responded like suggestions rather than commands. Distressed aircraft, this is Phantom Test 7. I have visual contact. What's your status? The response came through heavy static, the voice tight with controlled panic. Engine running rough, hydraulics failing, instruments are going dark. I've got maybe 10 minutes before I lose everything. Alex pulled her F-35 into formation, close enough to see the other pilot's face through the canopy. Lieutenant Sarah Chen, fresh from advanced training, her eyes wide with the kind of fear that came from realizing textbook emergencies were nothing like the real thing. Chen, listen to me, Alex's voice cut through the radio with calm authority. I'm going to talk you through this. First thing, stop fighting the stick. Let the aircraft tell you what it wants to do. I can't hold altitude. The engine's losing power. You don't need to hold altitude. You need to trade altitude for distance. We're going to glide this bird home. Back at Falcon Ridge, the control tower had gone silent except for the radio chatter between Alex and the distressed pilot. General Harrison stood behind the controllers, watching radar blips that represented two aircraft dancing on the edge of disaster. Sir, the lead controller spoke quietly, weather's getting worse. Even if she talks Chen through the approach, landing in these crosswinds is going to be impossible, Harrison finished. Unless you're someone who's done impossible things before. The radar showed Alex's aircraft maneuvering in ways that defied standard procedures. She was using her F-35 as a windbreak, positioning herself to give Chen's damaged F-16 a pocket of calmer air. It was a technique that existed only in theoretical discussions among test pilots, too dangerous for normal operations, too risky for anyone without absolute confidence in their abilities. Phantom Test 7, Falcon Tower, the controller transmitted. Recommend you maintain safe separation distance. Negative, Tower. Chen needs every advantage we can give her. Admiral Chen's voice crackled through the command center's secure phone. General, I've been authorized to share additional information about the Aurora program. Phantom Test 7 didn't just test experimental aircraft, she developed techniques that are now classified as advanced tactical procedures. What you're watching is someone who wrote the book on impossible recoveries. Harrison watched the radar display, seeing Alex's aircraft move with precision that looked more like computer simulation than human piloting. She's not just rescuing Chen. She's demonstrating capabilities that we thought were lost. The two aircraft appeared through the storm clouds like ghosts materializing from another dimension. Alex's F-35 led Chen's damaged F-16 in an approach that used every foot of available runway. At the last moment, Alex's aircraft peeled away, giving Chen clear airspace for touchdown. The F-16 hit the runway hard, bounced twice, and rolled to a stop with emergency vehicles surrounding it within seconds. Chen climbed out of the cockpit on shaking legs, pulled off her helmet, and looked up at the sky where Alex's F-35 was executing a victory roll that belonged in air shows, not rescue operations. As Alex's aircraft touched down, the entire base had gathered along the flight line. Ground crews, pilots, administrative personnel, everyone wanted to see the pilot who just pulled off a rescue that would become legend. Alex climbed down from the cockpit with movements that were purely economical, no wasted motion, no dramatic gestures. She pulled off her helmet, revealing hair damp with sweat and eyes that held the kind of calm that came from facing death and walking away. General Harrison approached, stopping precisely 6 feet away, close enough to show respect, far enough to acknowledge the magnitude of what had just happened. Captain Reynolds, he said, using her real rank for the first time. I believe we need to discuss your actual service record. Alex met his gaze steadily. I've been ready for that conversation for 3 years, General. The Aurora incident, Harrison continued. What really happened out there? For the first time, emotion flickered across Alex's face. I pushed an experimental aircraft beyond its design limits to save a classified mission. The aircraft didn't survive. Officially, neither did I. Lieutenant Chen approached, still shaky from her emergency landing. "Ma'am, I don't know who you are, but you just saved my life." Alex looked at the young pilot, seeing herself from years earlier, eager, talented, but not yet tested by the kind of situations that revealed what someone was truly made of. "You saved your own life, Lieutenant. I just gave you the confidence to do it." Harrison nodded slowly. "Captain Reynolds, as of this moment, you're reinstated to active flight status with full privileges. Anyone who has objections can discuss it with me personally." The crowd that had gathered along the flight line began to disperse, but the whispers followed Alex like contrails. Word spread through the base with the speed of classified information. The quiet ground crew technician was actually a legendary test pilot, someone who'd supposedly died pushing experimental aircraft beyond their breaking points. In the debriefing room, Admiral Chen's voice filled the secure speaker with the weight of Pentagon authority. "General Harrison, I'm transmitting Captain Reynolds' complete service record. What you'll see is a pilot who didn't just test aircraft, she revolutionized how we think about human performance under extreme conditions." The files that appeared on Harrison's classified terminal painted a picture that made him understand why the Aurora program had been buried so deeply. Alex hadn't just survived the incident 3 years ago, she'd accomplished something that changed fundamental assumptions about pilot capabilities. The Aurora aircraft was designed to operate at altitudes and speeds that pushed human physiology to its limits, Admiral Chen continued. Captain Reynolds didn't just fly it, she exceeded every performance parameter we thought possible. The incident occurred when she used the aircraft to intercept a hostile reconnaissance platform that threatened to expose the entire program. Alex sat quietly in the corner of the room, her expression unreadable as her classified history was finally unveiled. "The aircraft broke apart at Mach 4.2, she said simply. "I rode the wreckage down for 30,000 feet before the ejection seat fired. Medical experts said no one could survive ejection at those speeds and altitudes." Admiral Chen's voice carried a note of amazement even through the digital transmission. "The fact that you're sitting here challenges everything we know about human limits." General Harrison studied the woman who'd been fixing aircraft in his hangars for months. "Why didn't you come forward? Why hide as ground crew?" For the first time, Alex's composure cracked slightly. "Because I wasn't sure I was still the same pilot. The crash, it changes you. I needed to know if I could still fly, or if I was just someone who used to be able to fly." "And today's rescue mission?" Harrison asked. "Today I remembered who I am." The base loudspeaker crackled to life with an announcement that would reshape Falcon Ridge's culture forever. "All personnel, this is General Harrison. Effective immediately, Captain Alexandra Reynolds is assigned as Chief Test Pilot for Advanced Tactical Operations. Her call sign Phantom Test 7 is hereby reactivated." Over the following weeks, Alex's presence transformed the base. Young pilots who'd previously ignored the quiet ground crew technician now sought her out for advice. Her insights into aircraft performance came from a perspective that no simulator could replicate, someone who'd pushed machines and herself beyond theoretical limits. The F-35 she'd flown during the rescue mission became known as Phoenix among the ground crews, a bird that had carried a pilot back from the dead. Alex continued to perform her own pre-flight inspections, her hands moving across control surfaces with the kind of intimate knowledge that came from understanding how aircraft behaved when everything went wrong. Lieutenant Mitchell, who'd initially mocked her presence in the simulator, became one of her most dedicated students. "Captain, how do you maintain control when the aircraft is telling you it wants to die?" he asked during a training session. "You don't maintain control," Alex replied, her hands demonstrating on the simulator controls. "You negotiate with physics. Every aircraft has a personality, preferences, limits. Your job isn't to dominate, it's to find the partnership that keeps you both alive." The training scenarios Alex developed became legendary throughout the Air Force. She created situations that couldn't be solved through standard procedures, forcing pilots to think beyond their textbook training. Her methods produced aviators who could adapt to circumstances that would have been impossible to imagine before Aurora. One evening, as Alex performed a post-flight inspection on Phoenix, Lieutenant Chen approached. The young pilot had requested assignment to Alex's test program, determined to develop the kind of skills that had saved her life. "Captain, can I ask you something personal?" Chen said quietly. "Shoot. Do you ever regret pushing so hard? The crash, the years of hiding, was it worth it?" Alex considered the question, her hands still working on the aircraft. "I regret the secrecy. I regret the years of pretending to be someone I wasn't. But pushing limits? That's not something I regret. It's something I am." The conversation was interrupted by an alarm, another aircraft in distress, this time a civilian helicopter caught in mountain winds. Without waiting for orders, Alex was already moving toward Phoenix, her movements carrying the fluid confidence of someone who'd found her way home. As she climbed into the cockpit, the base watched with the kind of anticipation reserved for legends in action. This wasn't just another rescue mission, it was confirmation that some pilots transcend normal human limitations. Phoenix lifted off into the Nevada sunset, carrying Alex toward another impossible situation. But this time, she wasn't hiding who she was or questioning her abilities. The radio chatter that followed her departure carried a respect that had been missing from her life for 3 years. The rescue was textbook perfect, if textbooks covered scenarios that required flying a fighter jet as a search and rescue aircraft. Alex located the missing helicopter using techniques that combined radar analysis with pure instinct, talking the civilian pilot through an emergency landing that saved 4 lives. When she returned to Falcon Ridge, the base had changed. Not just in how people looked at her, but in how they understood what was possible. Ground crews worked with enhanced precision, knowing their aircraft might be pushed beyond normal limits. Pilots trained harder, inspired by someone who'd proven that excellence wasn't just about following procedures. General Harrison found Alex in Hangar 7, performing the kind of detailed maintenance that most pilots left to technicians. "You know, Captain, you don't have to do your own wrench work anymore." "I know," Alex replied, not looking up from the engine diagnostics. "But this is how I stay connected to the machine. Every vibration, every sound, it all matters when you're asking an aircraft to do impossible things." A young lieutenant named Torres approached nervously. He'd heard about Alex's reputation but had never spoken to her directly. "Ma'am, I've got a question about high-altitude recovery procedures." Alex looked at him with the same steady gaze that had once been dismissive, now carrying patient authority. "What's your scenario?" As Torres outlined his training challenge, other pilots gathered around. What started as a simple question became an impromptu masterclass in advanced flying techniques. Alex's explanations weren't theoretical, they came from someone who'd lived through situations that existed at the very edge of survivability. "The thing about pushing limits," Alex told the assembled pilots, "is that you don't do it for the adrenaline or the glory. You do it because sometimes the mission requires everything you have, and then a little more." Later that evening, Alex stood on the flight line, watching the last training flight return home. Admiral Chen's voice reached her through a secure phone call. "Captain, Washington wants to discuss reactivating the Aurora program. Your survival and continued capabilities have opened possibilities we thought were closed forever." Alex watched Phoenix being prepared for the next day's missions, her reflection visible in the aircraft's polished surface. "Admiral, I'm not interested in being a ghost anymore. Whatever comes next, it happens in the light." The conversation ended, but Alex remained on the tarmac as stars appeared in the desert sky. She'd spent 3 years hiding from who she was, afraid that the crash had broken something essential inside her. Today proved that some things, skill, courage, the ability to push beyond normal human limits, don't fade with time or trauma. A young airman approached, clearly nervous about interrupting a legendary pilot's solitude. "Ma'am, I just wanted to say thank you. My sister was on that civilian helicopter you rescued today." Alex turned, seeing the kind of gratitude that reminded her why she'd chosen to fly in the first place. "What's your name, Airman?" "Rodriguez, ma'am. I'm starting pilot training next month." "Good. Come find me when you get to advanced tactics. I'll show you some things they don't teach in flight school." As Rodriguez walked away, Alex realized that her story wasn't just about surviving the impossible, it was about inspiring others to discover their own limits and then exceed them. The Aurora program had created one exceptional pilot, but her return was creating something more valuable, a new generation of aviators who understood that excellence meant pushing beyond what seemed possible. The base settled into its nighttime routine, but Alex's influence continued to ripple through every conversation, every training session, every moment when a pilot faced a choice between safe and extraordinary. She'd learned that legends aren't born from hiding in shadows, they're forged in the crucible of impossible situations, when ordinary people choose to become something more. Her phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number, saw the news reports about the rescue. Knew you couldn't stay dead forever. Coffee tomorrow? Colonel Vance. Alex smiled, understanding that her story was far from over. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to push the boundaries of what humans could achieve in partnership with machines designed to defy gravity and logic. But tonight, she was simply Captain Alexandra Reynolds, test pilot, teacher, and living proof that some people are meant to fly beyond the edge of the possible, bringing back knowledge that transforms everyone who follows. The Nevada desert stretched endlessly around Falcon Ridge, but Alex no longer felt lost in its vastness. She had found her way home to the sky, and her wings were stronger for having been tested by fire. What stories do you have about overcoming impossible odds? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and remember, everyone deserves respect for their hidden talents and untold stories. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible tales of courage and redemption that remind us never to underestimate the quiet heroes among us.